The UK says terror attack is very likely to strike Canada as Ottawa labels threat medium.
You have the Israel-Palestine. You've got the issue between Hindus and Sikhs. You've got massive immigration, including a lot of asylum seekers and refugees crossing the border without us even knowing. And you've got a really bad economy. You put that all into a pot and give it a spin, and then you go, bad shit is going to continue to happen in that country. The United States already knew that Ukraine was going to bomb the Nord Stream pipeline. They were warned several months before it actually happened. And then somehow the plan was foiled, but it happened again a few months later. And everyone's like, oh, I don't really know what happened. Obviously, it didn't suit their narrative at the time to admit it, right? But now it does. Hey everybody, welcome to the BLENDR Report, where news meets rational thinking. I'm your host, Jonathan Harvey, and this is my co-host, Aaron Cole.
What's up, gang?
Please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. There will be episodes coming out every week. And if it's not too much trouble, please hit the like button and leave a comment if it adds some value to your life. All right, let's get into it.
Well, surprisingly enough, I'm not sure if you guys have noticed, but we're kind of matching again.
Bro, we did this 2 weeks in a row. This time it's down to the boots today.
Literally down to the boots. Well, it's totally unintentional, guys. You know, I told Jonathan earlier, I'm like, I'm going to have to start texting you in the morning, get some advice.
I'm going to wear purple next time. I'm just putting it out there. I'm just going to get ahead of this.
All right. Now we know. But man, I want to get your take on a pretty interesting video that came up across the internet. It was pretty wild, and it's pretty much centered around, you know, something that hits close to home because, you know, here in Toronto, we're seeing a lot of the drug epidemic go on, and we had he goes by the name of the Best Damn Roofer. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him.
Absolutely not.
He's been going viral on Twitter recently because in the pandemic, he was going around saying he charges liberals like 25% tax on their roofing homes just because, you know, because there's no one else to work it. So he's like, all right, if you're liberal, you know, 25%. But yeah, he's gained quite a bit of fame on Twitter. And he made a recent video that was just kind of like talking and highlighting the recent drug epidemic. So let's pull it up. We're going to go through this video and get it started.
Unfortunately, in St. Catharines, we have a drug problem and we have an epidemic right now that the government's not doing anything about. It's one sad state of affairs. This poor little girl here is addicted to drugs. As you can see, she's battered and she just wants to go home, but there's no resources in St. Catharines to help these people. So I'm literally trapped in my vehicle in St. Catharines by a homeless individual that's drug addict. And she wants to go home. And this is what we have to deal with in St. Catharines, where our government officials pay themselves more every day. They're legalizing safe drug supplies and destroying the youth. And this is what happens. It's one of the saddest things in the world. Poor thing. This is what our government's allowing us to destroy our future, destroy young people. It's one of the saddest things I've ever witnessed in my life, and it's happening over and over again. Piles of 10 cities throughout this nation, and everyone just sitting back. It's going to happen to everybody. They're turning our people against us. They're turning our medicines and against us. They're just, the things they're doing to our country is disgusting, and this is the outcome of it all. Anyways, guys, God bless, stay strong, and I don't know what to do with this problem in our city, and the government's not helping us at all, unfortunately.
Oof.
That's wild.
Heavy. Yeah.
I mean, I don't even know what to say anymore about this kind of stuff. It's, you know, you get it here in Canada, you get it in the States. I'm sure you have it in other parts of the world. It's just such a in your face, you know, example of just how bad our country's being run, how poorly people that need help are being managed, how all these programs, these safe drug supply programs, and all the stuff that these politicians do to virtue signal to pretend that they're solving the problem, it's not working. It's just getting worse and worse and worse. And I wonder sometimes, like, you know, we live in a world where there's no accountability from politicians, right?
Yeah, absolutely zero.
None. They can spend all the money they want. They can do whatever they want. They can be corrupt. Anything they like. There's no real accountability. That's obviously the biggest problem here. But I sometimes wonder, and I'll throw the question back to you, is why did they let it get to this point? Because there's a lot of theories and a lot of ideas, and people put that tinfoil hat and they strap that bitch up real quick when it comes to why.
Yeah.
But a lot of times their why is rather complicated, and it would mean that the government was actually had like a devious plan in place, but they're not that smart. They're just not, especially with that many people involved at scale. So why do you think our governments are letting this stuff happen? Or do you think it's just a result of just doing such a bad job with no accountability?
Yeah, I think I agree with you in the sense that I don't think they have like a direct motivation to have it happen. However, I do think it plays a role into plans they may have. So it's just one of those convenient things that happen as a result of pre-planned ideas. And what I mean by that is, so the drug epidemic is a result of the desolate conditions that a lot of Canadians are living in. They reach wit's end and they're desperate. They're at that point where they're just like, you know what, fuck it. Like, this is my last choice and this is all that they have, right? And the reason why I think the government is kind of complicit in, creating these like safe supply areas is because think about it like this. Why, if they don't want to have and take care of these people anymore and, have these people rehabilitated, they're like, all right, we'll give you an environment where you can just kill yourself. You know what I mean? And just have the problem take care of itself without them actually, being the ones to sweep them off their feet and, delete them. So I think it's a scenario where they have the advantage of they don't want to take care of the poor anyway. And this is just a better way to have them destroy themselves than just outright having them city sweep them and just cut the cord. So I think it serves into that role, but I won't go as far to say as, oh, it's some strict agenda, like they want this to happen. Like, no, I think this is just a result of, certain actions at play to make, the standard of living a lot worse and conditions a lot harder for people. And in bad times, people turn to drugs. You know what I mean? And just making it more accessible is just going to lead to more people doing it, and more people doing it leading to more people destroying their lives and more people potentially ending up dead, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, I have a bit of I sort of feel similarly, but I have a little bit of a different take on it, as much as I think it's a nefarious person that would see this as something where you would use these as tools to kill people off. And I'll tell you why I think that way is because you as a politician are accountable, right? So what was the big thing that they wouldn't do through the pandemic? Well, they would keep preaching, we can't lose one life. We can't lose one life. Well, guys, you're losing them to suicide, using them to drugs. You're losing to a lot of other things. Yeah. But if they locked people down, then no old people or no one would die from the pandemic. So they would have shelter. They'd be they would have a shield in front of them. Like, we're not responsible for what happens because we're doing the right thing. I think if they have these drug programs with the intention of deleting a certain volume of society, the pushback is on them. So I actually think that this is a result of not providing any tough love to society when they need it, and instead just implementing these super left-wing woke ideologies that don't belong in politics. None of it really seems to make a safe drug supply. You're just gonna have an uptake of people doing drugs. It's like the party doesn't end. That's kind of what it is. So it's just it's these people that have no practical experience in solving any of these problems, going there and having no accountability, and then just picking up the furthest left-wing ideology they can put in place to try to make themselves seem like they're solving the problem. But the result is it's just it's two wrongs, obviously not making a right.
Yeah, and if you ask me, they're basically monetizing the problem as well, too, because who's paying for this safe drug supply? Taxpayers, right? And then who gets the money? These medical institutions that are basically getting these contracts to supply these drugs.
Yeah, I'm sure there's probably something on the back end to that. Yeah, I don't think it's as substantial as you think because the volume's probably not that high, but you're right. There's something there as well. Somebody's making a few bucks.
Someone's always making a few bucks, but it's sad to see, man. And I just hope we get to a place where we can see a lot of people rehabilitate, because these are all human beings at the end of the day. We might see them as quote unquote drug addicts right now, but I don't think aiding that issue is the solution. Definitely needs some.
It's
some
definitely
tough
not.
love.
It's just no, you don't. You don't give more crack to a crackhead. What are you talking about? It's never the answer. Go to AA meetings and you just crack open a fucking 2-4. What are we talking about? Just drink your problems away, dude. Join us. What?
Yeah.
So yeah, I know it's preposterous. But anyway.
All right. Well, with that then, let's get into it. So we'll move on to headline number 1. And for headline number 1 for today, we have the UK says terror attack is very likely to strike Canada as Ottawa labels threat medium. This is based on a National Post article. And in this article, it stated that a new UK travel advisory was issued this month, while the Canadian level hasn't changed since 2014. The UK and the Canadian governments are currently showing very different levels of terror threat assessments for Canada. On the British government's travel advisory page for Canada, an update from November 3rd reads, and I quote, "There is a high threat of terrorist attack globally affecting UK interests and British nationals, including from groups and individuals who view the UK and British nationals as targets. You should remain vigilant at all times." This is followed by a bold-faced warning, and I quote, once again, "Terrorists are very likely to try and carry out attacks in Canada." It adds, "Attacks could be indiscriminate, including in places visited by foreigners. You should remain aware of your surroundings, keep up to date with local media reports, and follow the advice of local authorities." It then lists recent attacks, including the stabbing this year in Surrey, BC, and in 2021, the van attack that killed 4 members of the same family in London, Ontario. So, what do you think about this, Jonathan?
Bro, look how far this country's fallen. Like, the UK is issuing travel warnings to their own people not to come to this country. One of the primary reasons people move to Canada is for safety and quality of life. Both of them they've fallen off a cliff. You know, it's pretty crazy to me. Like, I'm not super surprised that we're in this category right now, and I'll tell you why. Is because, I mean, I imagine the United States is probably in the same category as well. Like, I didn't look into it, but that adds up to me given what's going on. So, but I mean, you look at what's happening with our strife with India, right? You take Trudeau, you put him in the House. This is the most ridiculous place to do this. He goes into the House and he basically accuses India of being complicit or carrying out a hit within Canada, a Canadian citizen. He was a Sikh. So you kind of go, if that happened, if that's the case, what you do, like the proper way to manage this is through the right channels. You don't do it in the House of Parliament where you're basically broadcasting it to the world. Because what you're saying to India is, I'm picking a fight with you on the global stage because you made an ass out of me at the G20. That's what happened. That's what it was. So,
yeah.
But since then, what that did was that exacerbated the issues between India and the Sikhs in Canada. Now, I don't deeply know this issue, but what I do know is it's been all over the news since then. And there's been a lot more violence and a lot more of these issues between these groups. And there's been a big kickback, obviously, between the governments as well. But this kind of tracks given Trudeau's sort of play here. And then you also look at what's happening with Israel-Palestine. Dude, every single week, there are hundreds of thousands of people protesting. And you know what? For better or worse, the majority of them are protesting for peace in Palestine. They are waving Palestinian flags. And there are also, I've seen a few that have popped up recently too that are, to support Israel and the Jewish communities and to push back against anti-Semitism. So you're getting it from both sides, and you're getting violence from both sides. So when you just kind of look at that alone, put aside the issues that they were talking about in the article with the guy killing the family and the van and the violence with the knife and stuff like that. If you kind of look at what's happening systemically here is we're creating a breeding ground for these foreign nationals to come here and argue with each other over their issues that are happening in other parts of the world. So it's no real big surprise that there are terror threats here now. And I mean, on the weekend, what was interesting is the day after this article came out, there was a bomb threat on the Toronto Reference Library. Now, I want to preface this by saying, I think it was in 2016, we averaged 1.5 bomb threats a week. That was about right. Sort of, you know what I mean? In kind of that range, about 75 a year in Canada. So they happen all the time. Now, but I just found it odd that it happened literally the next day. And the Toronto Reference Library it's not an insignificant target. It's 416,000 square feet in the middle of Yorkville. It's got a 10,000 person population. It's a big target. That's what I mean. There's 10,000 people in the immediate area. That would be a big mess. And now, again, I don't know about the validity of it. I'm not even really sure how connected they are. But you're seeing more and more of these things as these international conflicts continue to happen here. The problem you have is that Trudeau, his answer, in regular Trudeau fashion, he didn't address the issue, right? He goes, I'm doing everything I need to be doing to keep Canadians safe. Are you? You haven't changed the terror threat assessment since you've been in office. Did you even know there was one? Because I have a funny feeling he doesn't. And now Pierre's obviously pushing back and be like, hey, bro, you got to do something about this. He's like, everything's fine. I got this under control. Trudeau, no, you don't. You don't have it under control. And I'm really hoping that he can put his partisan politics aside and ask the UK for information here, because originally what the UK said was, look, It's not our business to tell you what we think is wrong with your country. We just think it's wrong.
Yeah.
But at this point, if our prime minister has such a blind spot that he can't identify that our country's in peril and there are legitimate terror threats ongoing all the time, then maybe he does need to ask our ally across the pond to be like, hey, what do you know that we don't know so we can actually try to keep Canadians safe?
And that's the main question what I think needs to be asked. I think it's very simple enough. Like they're all a part of NATO. Why isn't intel being shared at that point? But we don't particularly know if they have or if they haven't. But from what it seems like, they're not taking any action. And just to add a little bit of context to what you said about like the dispute between the Sikhs and the Hindus specifically going on in Canada with like the Indian beef, for lack of a better word. Yeah, so just to add a little bit of context. So this whole Canada-India beef is pretty much started in the 80s, actually. So I'm not sure if you're too familiar. India has accused Canada for years of harboring like Sikh terrorists. Yeah. Bobby specific, they're more so talking about Khalistani. And for the people that don't know, Khalistan is essentially, there's a certain sector of Sikhs that believe that they want to create a separate state, similar to like how Quebec wants to separate from
They're the
Canada.
Separatists of that.
Yeah, they're the separatists of India essentially, and they want to create a separate region.
Yep.
And they want to call it Khalistan. So that's why they call them Khalistani Sikhs.
Okay.
Right. And in 1985, there was an incident where Canada was accused of turning a blind eye to these type of terrorists. And what happened in 1985, there was an Air India flight that went from Montreal to New Delhi that was bombed based on a Canadian Sikh terrorist at that time. And it killed all 329 people on that plane, mostly Hindus at that time. So it was a terror attack that was, although it didn't take place on Canadian soil, it was planned on Canadian soil. And then the bomb was executed once they got near landing in New Delhi and everything like that. So that was like the beginning of this whole situation. And then now you have, the rising population of Sikh Canadians. Obviously, not all are involved in this Khalistani situation, but there's a percentage that are taking over the narrative from the majority at the time right now. And once again, I'm trying my best to explain this in synopsis as an outsider because it's not my community, right? But just that whole situation there has been brewing for well over almost 30 years now. And now with that recent, attack that took place, I guess that was kind of like the tipping, the one that broke the camel's back, essentially, that we're seeing there.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if it broke the camel's back or if it was just convenient for Trudeau to bring it up. That's actually what I think it was.
Two birds, one stone. It could be both.
I think that's exactly it. I think there was enough shelter behind the move that he could say it and be like, I'm doing the right thing. But if you look at what happened at the G20 and you look at how he was treated and his plane went down and he was made a fool of and he didn't go to dinner and he would shake hands and blah, 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 blah. Yeah. You look at all that and you kind of go, he came back here looking for blood. That's what he did. That's what he did. He came back, he threw his little temper tantrum, and he thought, how can I fire back at these people? And that's obviously the biggest conflict that he has. So he honestly, like I say, politicians do. They take an issue off the shelf, and they weaponize it whenever they need to. And I firmly believe that, I firmly do. I believe that the publicization of this or the escalation of this particular issue is a lot of that is on Trudeau and putting this and airing these issues in public versus through proper channels if you really cared about resolving it.
Yeah, and that's the most unfortunate thing, and we're seeing and like you said, I think as Canada is becoming a more diverse nation, it's bringing along a lot of diverse problems as well too, and these are some things that people consider as well too, and I think this is why a lot of people want. It's not that people are against like immigration. I think people just want better vetting processes because who are we bringing over, right? And we got to be certain about who's bringing what type of previous histories with them as well and things of that nature. And I think that's where a lot of the outside concern, where maybe they might have some intel, maybe on their end, because they probably have, like in the UK, they probably have similar situations considering there's a lot of like ex-Indian nationals over there as well too. So maybe they have some intel that they picked up on, and I guess this was their best way of warning us.
You know what? To be honest with you, I think it's just more obvious than that. I think it's like, I think they're looking at the issues. They're going, You have the Israel-Palestine. You've got the issue between Hindus and Sikhs. You've got massive immigration, including a lot of asylum seekers and refugees crossing the border without us even knowing. And you've got a really bad economy. You put that all into a pot and give it a spin, and then you go, bad shit is going to continue to happen in that country. So you know what? Even from the macro perspective, I think it's pretty obvious. I don't think if they do have any specific particular details, obviously that would be helpful so we could try to address these issues. And maybe that's what Trudeau needs. Maybe they need like draw him a picture, use crayons so he can kind of understand what's happening. And then maybe he can fix these issues because I'm an idiot. I'm going to assume you're in the same category as I am. And we can identify these issues at scale. So the guy's just being delinquent in his duties and should step down because he sucks.
Hey, I like to let people know. I like to break things down from a C student perspective.
Yeah.
Plain English, man. But all right, let's moving forward now. Let's get into headline number 2. So for headline number 2, we have supporting students. Some teachers say they won't follow Saskatchewan's pronoun law. This is based on a CTV article, and this article says that Alex Smith says that she knows she may face consequences for not following the province's pronoun law, but it's a risk she's willing to take. The Regina public school teacher says she'd rather ensure gender diverse children who could be put at risk at the law are safe. Part of the process has always been, number 1, thank you for sharing this with me, and number 2, how can I support you? Schmid told the Canadian press in an interview. She said also in that same interview, and I quote, I think that this respects the rights of parents. And if children say, I need you to support me and not share this information until I understand how, then that is the way that I would support students. So what are your thoughts on this, Jonathan?
Look, this whole thing's been way overblown and it's preposterous. And honestly, this woke ideology needs to die. Like, no, it does. It really does. Because here's the thing.
It's a virus at the end of the day.
Here's my problem with this. We trust parents to raise their children in every aspect of their lives until they're 18 years old. They are responsible for that kid until that kid is 18. You know, feed them, clothe them, house them, take care of them, nurture them, do all these things. And I know some people have a rough go of it, but that's what we trust parents to do. Except for some weird reason, on this particular issue, when it comes to selecting your sexual identity, when you're too young to even understand the ramifications of it, we think that the school system, an extension of the state, are the people that should be in charge. What the fuck? I'm sorry, but that doesn't make any sense at all. Like, when you were growing up and you went to school, how did you feel about your teachers, usually?
For the most part, most of my teachers are kind of lame, but I had a few cool teachers. I'm not going to lie, I had a few cool teachers.
Right, but the thing is they weren't even friends. They were just like, it was like an authority figure that you would never really get too close to. You were okay with them. You kept a very healthy distance. Now all of a sudden, kids are supposed to they're supposed to trust them and seek their approval and go to them with their problems more so than their own family and their own parents. What are we doing?
You know what I'd add to that, just to add a little bit of context? So I don't know. I know this has happened to me before just because sometimes, and I've seen it happen to other students as well. Sometimes you're around teachers so much, especially like, let's say if it's a woman teacher. By any chance, you might subconsciously say, "Oh, mom," just like subconsciously. Some people do that, right? It depends on like if you're cool with the teacher or not. So I've seen it happen in some scenarios, right? Never really happened to me too much, but I've seen some students accidentally like call their parents. So maybe there's some teachers who feel like they're that close with their students that they're almost like a secondary parent. I don't agree with that notion, but maybe that's how some of the teachers feel because it does happen in the classroom.
But we're talking about macro policy applied at scale, not the odd person that gets along well with everybody who ends up being the guidance counselor. We're not talking about that person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's just not, for me, this whole thing has just gotten to a point where they are continuing to defend this idea that kids should be able to keep, or that teachers rather, it's not kids, that teachers should be keeping the gender identity of a student away from their parents. Look, is there anything that a teacher should keep from the parents of a child? Really?
Absolutely nothing.
Absolutely nothing.
And my teachers wouldn't. Like,
right,
if I did something at school, guess what? My parents are getting a phone call.
That's exactly, that's what I mean. So there is actually nothing that lives on that table, except we're allowing this one thing to live in that space, which is relatively new over the last decade. We've introduced these weird ideas to these kids that a lot of them are prepubescent. They don't even understand what any of these things, they don't have the faculties to make these decisions and understand what this means. And instead, what we're doing in these public school systems is we're rewarding kids for making these choices. So when you're a kid, you want to be loved, you want to get along, you want to be right, you want to do the right thing, you want to be a good kid. Like a little puppy dog, you want to be a good dog.
Yeah.
So if your teacher is waving a rainbow flag and telling you that if you're on this side of the fence, you get treated differently, you get treated better, you're special. They reward it. What the hell do you think kids are going to do? And now they're saying
it's Pavlov's theory.
That's exactly it. And now they're saying we don't want to include parents in this decision. Look, what's happening is politicians, some of them have kids. You know, parents, they're pushing back against the politicians that are in power. And now they're finally putting policy in place, legislation in place that says, hey, enough of this shit. Guys, you went too far. But you've got a lot of these weird, hard left-wing woke ideologues that are continuing to push this thing like it's their hill to die on. Go have your own kids and go take care of them and leave the rest of them alone.
Exactly.
And here's the thing that's really important. We're not saying that kids can't be whatever they want or whoever they want. I'm very, I always believe in your right to choose to be exactly who you are. Yeah. But before you're 18 years old, in the vast majority of cases, your best support network is going to be at home. Making a decision about something like this that you shouldn't even make before you're 18, that's how I firmly feel about it, should never be made outside of the home and should never have anybody from the state involved in these decisions. Yeah. It's just gone too far. And you know what? You're going to have these odd groups that are going to push back and be like, we're going to do what's right for kids. And, you know, you're all this other crap. They're going to eventually get snuffed out. They are the last, I don't mean that like physically. I mean their voices are going to get snuffed out. Like you get these teachers that are doing this stuff, but they're losing support. They're the last of the fringe. They're the last of the people that are arguing, saying, we're going to stand up and we're going to do this. And they're going to start getting fired. They're going to start getting let go because the policy is in place and now the law is on our side. The law is on the side of the parents now. So when these people say this stuff, let them talk shit. Let them scream. That's what they're doing right now because now the law is actually pushing back against them. So if they choose to do this, you're going to watch one case. You're going to see one case where someone's going to do this. Some blue-haired freak who's teaching your kids is just going to happen, who doesn't have any kids of their own, by the way.
Or have intentions of having kids.
Exactly, but they're going to tell you what's right and wrong. They're going to get let go. And then all of a sudden, everyone in that whole circle is going to go, well, I have to eat. That's more important than letting some kid choose their gender and hiding it from their parents. And that's the day that it's going to stop. We need one good example, and this shit will start coming to an end because the law is finally in the right place on this issue.
Yeah, and it's a good thing because I think it kind of goes to that notion of, you know, when you give an inch, a lot of people take a mile at the end of the day. And, you know, like for those who aren't aware, but I mentioned this quite a bit time, you know, I'm a part of the first Gen Z generation, so 96. So it wasn't as prominent when I was like going through school, but it was like starting. Right. Like I noticed around like high school, a lot of this stuff like really started for me around like grade 10. So this was like 2012. Yeah. My gosh.
Bro, I graduated high school in 2003.
Oh my gosh. Yo, I was like what, 7? That's wild. That was wild. Yeah. Oh, but good times. So
high school was a good time for me, 100%, man.
It was fun. But I noticed around that time, that's when they really started like getting aggressive on this, you know, the LGTV.
Yeah, leave it at
my
that.
My LGTV agenda. And I remember, it literally happened. Like one time, I was in English class. Yeah. We had a test, right? And this whole honestly, let me get it. But they add so many letters, man. I just can't go off on it.
That's what it is now. That's what it is now.
Yeah, like it's no offense to the L's and the LB and the G's. No offense, but everything else after that, I'm sorry, you lost me. But back to the point what I was saying. I noticed like around that time, like around like your grade 10, like for me is like when they really started to get aggressive with it. And I remember I was at a Catholic school too, so that's the craziest part. And there was a teacher for some people of my friends who were following, you might know her. I'm not gonna say her name, but it was a certain English teacher that marked very hard and everyone hated around that time. If you know, you know. And this woman, like, we had like a test at the end of the day, and I remember it was Pride Month, and she went on. Mind you, we only have like an hour to do the test, and she took like 35 minutes of the class, giving us some super like unhinged, like rant about the month and why we need to give our support and everything like that. And I remember, like, I had to stop her in her tracks. I literally got up and I said, Miss, I know you're passionate about this, but we have a test to do. Like, we have a test to do. I had
the only student in history stops the teacher from ranting to do a test.
Yeah, no, legit. Because, like, you know, it was getting to the point where I was like, all right, like, I also wanted her to shut up. I'm not.
Yeah, you're like, I'm already gonna fail this fucking thing. Give me a break. Yeah.
Just give me a break. Yeah. So I got her to stop, and then as soon as, like, you know, I told, you know how they get that crazy look in their eyes, the big bulging eyes.
Pop them out. Let's go.
They
they're in the WWE, and it's the Undertaker.
They get activated, and I don't know what it was, but she started going on some unhinged rant. How she said, "Oh, by the end of the day, by the end of month, oh, she's gonna make sure I'm at all of the Pride events, and I'm gonna sit front row, and I need to be." And I was just like, first of all, I didn't ask for all of that. Second of all, like, we're in a Catholic school. I don't know how you got in that. Like,
you're in a Catholic.
You know, I literally said that. I'm like, second of all, we're in a Catholic school. I don't know how you got in
so
here, like doing all of that.
How did you penetrate the system, lady?
Yeah, like, and then there's just second. I'm like, do you even believe what's in the Bible and stuff like that? And then she got super aggressive again. Then that's when I said, all right, like, enough's enough. Like no, for real. Like, let's do the test. Then obviously she called the principal on me and everything like that. She said I was, like, getting aggressive and I was gonna fight her and all type of stuff. And funny enough, the principal when I got to the office, they didn't even, like, scold me. They're just like, oh, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Like, and you know that look when they're just like, we know she's crazy, but we can't tell you she's crazy.
Yeah. We have to show her a little bit of support, but we're not here to give you any trouble.
Yeah, exactly. And that and they just kept me, and they did everything. And then, because I'm so cool with some of my teachers, like, after the fact, I asked them about that later on, and I said, like, yeah, like, they know she's crazy. It's just that they couldn't fire her. So there's so many situations like that. And the reason why I brought that up is because there has to be strong precedent in order to, like, fire a lot of these teachers, because they have have strong units. So if the law's, you know, on the side of the parents, this is going to be a huge factor in terms of, like, getting them removed. Because back then, you know, there wasn't anything protecting people from, like, you know, hearing these types of things or, like, you know, being influenced in these types of ways.
No, you're right. They were basically, they had a blank check to write whatever they wanted on it and cash it and how treat these kids however they wanted and do whatever they wanted to parents. Now there's a law in place that will turn the tide. So yeah. I agree. Let's go.
Well, with that being said, then let's move on to headline number 3. So for headline number 3, we have a Ukrainian military officer coordinated the Nord Stream pipeline attack. This is based on an Al Jazeera article. And in this article, it says that the Kremlin has expressed an alarm over a report that a senior Ukrainian military officials acting without their president's knowledge coordinated an attack on Russia's Nord Stream gas pipelines last year. A spokesman for the Russian president, Vladimir Putin, said on Monday that the report published by the Washington Post is further evidence of Ukrainian involvement in the attack, and said that the West should be concerned over the claim that the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was unaware of the operation. So, Jonathan, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few really big things going on here. You know, first of all, the United States already knew that Ukraine was going to bomb the Nord Stream pipelines. They were warned several months before it actually happened. And then somehow the plan was foiled, but it happened again a few months later, the exact same way it was planned. And everyone's like, oh, I don't really know what happened. I mean, obviously it didn't suit their narrative at the time to admit it, right? But now it does.
Of course.
So now you're going to continue to see more and more stuff that is sort of pushing against. It's not going to be anti-Ukraine propaganda. That's not what this is going to be. It is, in a sense, from a macro level. But on the micro, it's going to be more like going, well, there's instability in the country. Zelensky didn't even know what was going on between him and his top generals. So you're sort of showing the world, like, hey, these guys aren't organized. We need to kind of bring an end to this. And I believe you're going to continue to see more and more stuff like this that is going to sort of discredit not really their effort as much as their organization and leadership. So this is why I think you're starting to see this now. You know, but what's interesting about this is this also kind of creates a bit of a divide between Ukraine and Europe. And I'm not sure how this is going to be played out. I'm not sure how they're going to view this. But the Nord Stream pipeline runs, there's 2 of them. They run from Russia into Germany. And they supply a ton of natural gas to the European Union, which is under a major energy crisis. So if you're kind of looking at this issue and you're going, okay, Chervinsky and a top general were really the ones that were responsible for this, so Ukraine did this, they sort of, in a sense, yeah, they were going at Russia, okay, but they sort of sabotaged energy supply for the European Union. How do they view this? How does this leave their relationship? What does this do to their EU accession? Does this become a bigger issue? I don't really have the answers to that, but it's interesting to see it come out now because, like I said, they knew about this a long time ago.
But yeah, I think what's happening a lot of the times right now is that the West is just pretty much becoming like super impatient with Ukraine at the moment, and I think everyone aside from the government officials and the media are just ready to put this to bed. Like, I haven't even seen, they're already moved on to the next issue, the next current thing. You know what I mean? Now it's, for a lot of people, they're throwing up their support for whatever it may be, whether it's Israel or Palestine. And I think people are just kind of over it. They feel like it's drawn out. They don't care anymore. Their life is become significantly worse since this started. They tried the embargoes, and that made their life hard.
That'll never do anything.
They try, and then to make it even worse, like with the bombing, I think it accounts for what, like 33% of Europe's energy, and that's a pretty significant amount of energy loss. And then adding the embargo on that is just a painful situation. But one thing I did notice out of that situation is we did, as Canada, missed a huge opportunity to kind of fill that void as well too, there with that situation. But that's a little bit of a side note with that, though.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Actually, the problem is that from the moment we have an idea in Canada, the amount of red tape we have to cut through, it takes 5 to 7 years to get anything in place. But if Trudeau had done this, we have a massive amount of natural gas here, and we could have supplied to Europe it would have made our country so much more prosperous and created so many jobs and all these other things. But they're just like, well, the environment, so I'm not anti-environment, but I worry about the stability of the country. You worry about the people. You look at the things that are happening. You look at the violence. You look at all of the other issues we have. A lot of those could be resolved if we had a stronger economy. And he's had so many opportunities to basically solve these issues, and this was a really big one. So you're actually 100% right. With respect to sort of wrapping things up in the Ukraine-Russia conflict, these types of issues, what they do is they create a different perspective on Ukraine. So they put this out, and then everybody that's a part of the European Union goes, okay, well, this kind of pisses us off and has made our lives harder, so now they start losing public support. Now it gets easier, like you said, to put this to bed. More and more of these things are going to come out. And you know what the next big question is going to be? They're going to go, well, if Zelensky didn't know about this, which was probably the biggest global catastrophe, like outside of the war itself, was probably the Nord Stream pipeline with respect to this war. Yeah. That was the biggest issue, and he had no idea that his generals did it. What else doesn't he know? What else does he know about where the money's going and all these other things and the munitions and the war? Like, this is going to become, this is their access point, in my opinion, to sort of changing public opinion about how well that they are running their ship there. And I think, like you said, you're going to see it come to an end sooner than later because of articles like this, and this is how they're just going to continue fueling their number one tool, the media.
Yeah, so we'll likely see an end to this soon. I think we're going to stay up to date on it and obviously keep you guys informed on that situation. But let's move on to the next topic for today. So for the next headline, we have headline number 4. The FBI seized New York City Mayor Eric Adams' phones and iPads. This is based on an AP News article, and in this article it states that FBI agents quietly seized the phones and an iPad from New York City Mayor Eric Adams earlier this week as a part of an investigation into political fundraising during his 2021 campaign. His attorney disclosed on Friday. The seizures happened as Adams was leaving a public event in Manhattan, according to a statement from one of the mayor's attorneys, Boyd Johnson. On Monday night, the FBI approached the mayor after an event. The mayor immediately complied with the FBI's request and provided them with electronic devices, Johnson said. The mayor has not been accused of any wrongdoings and continues to cooperate with the investigation. So, Jonathan, what do you think about this?
Well, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that Adams went against the grain, right? So what he did was he pushed back against the immigration problem they're having in New York. He went against the DNC. He went against the Democratic policy against allowing all these people into his state, and he did so because it was bankrupting the state and ruining his city. So I give him credit for actually pushing back, but This goes to show you, man, when you swim with political sharks, you get bit. That's what this is, right?
Oh, yeah.
And if you look at how this is played out, so he's the target, right? But they've had 3 or 4 people that are in his cabinet that have all gone down. They raided Brian Suggs' house the other day. Another one of his advisors has gone down. The FBI has basically got their sights on him because he pushed back and he made the Democrats look bad. Because, like, New York is the most powerful United States city. So when you lose, and it's been Democratic forever, right?
Yeah.
So when you start losing their support vocally to the Democratic Party with an election coming up, what are you going to do? You're going to target the guy. You're going after him. You know what I mean? And here's the thing. He is complying because I'm of the opinion he didn't actually do anything wrong. But by proxy, he's going to go down. When they go for re-election, you know that they're going to support another candidate to take his place.
Yeah.
No matter what. So even if he does nothing wrong, this is kind of a dog and pony show, right? Because if they had something on him, they would have already got it, right? So either he was really careful about doing corrupt things to get elected, and so he doesn't mind giving up his phones and his iPads, or he was not complicit. He didn't do it. Doesn't mean that people, look, politics are one of those games that if you want to be in a powerful position, money comes into play. That's just how it works, right?
Yeah.
So given that situation, you're going to have people either directly or sort of indirectly, supporting candidates that are doing some shady shit. I bet if you look at any high-powered politician and any real, sought-after role, you could dig deep enough, you'll find something. I don't think he was really involved in this. I really don't. But I think he's going to go down for it because they're raising enough of a stink about the whole thing. They're making this a big enough issue. By raiding that Brianna Suggs girl's house, by taking his phones, by doing all this stuff, and by just basically spraying it all over the media, now Adams is corrupt, right?
All of a sudden.
Because he did not agree with one Democratic idea because it's ruining the country and ruining his city. Now they're going to say that he's corrupt and he's going to be replaced. But this is just the way of politics, unfortunately. And when you have this much money at play in this game, you just get bought out, man. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, that's the name of the game. I guess, a lot of politicians are just the face of, corporate interests at the end of the day. And as much as they're elected, they're almost selected in a certain way by certain donors and high impact entrepreneurs and investors and things of that nature. But what I find super interesting about this entire situation that's going on with Mayor Adams is that I think it's hopeful in the sense that it's showing that there's more dissension in the Democratic Party than people realize. And they're almost having a very split divide. And it's showing that people are becoming more independent. Whereas before, Democrats could never go after Democrats. You know what I mean? Maybe you might see it from the squad, so the AOCs of the world and everything like that. But they were kind of doing it just to rile up a young voter base and things of that nature. But this is more about impactful issues that are impacting everyday citizens rather than, Twitter arguments. So I think it's going to be interesting how it's going to play into the election because regardless of if they remove Adams or not, I think the damage is kind of done already. He's kind of pointing out a lot of hypocrisy, right?
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I mean, it's two things. I do think it's good that you're seeing people push back within their own parties. Vivek Ramaswamy's doing it too from the Republican side. He's pushing back pretty hard against a lot of what's happening. He's calling them out for their bullshit, which is great. You need that. Look, bad ideas get beat with better ideas, and then everyone progresses. Yep. It's a pretty simple formula. But what they've done is everybody's a yes man or a yes woman, and you toe the party line and whatever. But you're right, it is good to see that they're pushing back, but it also points to something else, that things have become so bad that they don't have a choice. Because these people are giving up high-paying jobs with access and power and all these things because that's how bad the country's situation has become. So it's good, but it's good for a bad reason.
Yeah, that's a good point. But I guess things have to get worse before it gets better. But with that being said, let's move on to the next topic. And for headline number 5, we have Trump asked the court to televise the federal trial. This is also based on a New York Times article. And within this article, it says that the lawyers for former President Donald J. Trump have told a judge that she should permit his trial on federal charges of plotting to overturn the 2020 election to be televised live from the courtroom. It was the first time that Mr. Trump has formally weighed in on the issue of whether to broadcast any of the 4 criminal trials he is facing. His motion to Judge Tanya S. Chutkin who is overseeing the federal election trial in Washington, came to a similar request made by several media organizations and was filed late on Friday. A judge in Georgia who is handling the Mr. Trump's state election subversion case said that the proceeding will be televised. But the request to Judge Chutkin is likely to face an uphill battle given that the federal rules of criminal procedure and the Supreme Court generally prohibit cameras in the federal courtrooms. So, Jonathan, what are your thoughts on this situation with Mr. Trump?
It's very Trump. He's like, hey, bring all the cameras, guys.
That's him. He's a TV guy, right?
Yeah, 100%, dude. I think it's interesting, right? And I see both sides of it. And there's actually been precedent on both sides to say like each one has supported themselves pretty well. So I could see this going both ways. With Trump, I think what's important to him is getting his FaceTime with the people of the United States now that he's been thrown off his campaign trail, right? Because that's really what he wants. He's like, okay, well, you're taking me away from here. I can't go see my people at these rallies. Let me at least see them on TV, and I'll show them who I am, what I'm made of, and how I'll fight for this country. So that's why he wants to be on TV, and this totally makes sense. The other reason I think he wants to be on TV is because I think he knows he's going to be found innocent. And that's really important because that makes this a turning point for the Republicans to show that the Democrats weaponized the DOJ, and all they were trying to do was throw him off the campaign trail. And then he was able to basically implement this, hey, bring your cameras along, to show them. And this will be the moment that the tide turns for Trump and the Republicans. I'm not a huge supporter of Trump at all by any means. That's how I'm seeing this. Now, on the other side, Jack Smith, I'm not a big fan of that guy. It's mainly his face. I don't like it. But he's a special counsel for the DOJ.
He looks punchable or something?
It's very punchable. He's a special counsel for the DOJ. I guess what I don't like is that every time something bad happens to Biden's campaign, Jack Smith and the DOJ were weaponized against Trump. And I think it was really just, it's sort of, it paints such a bad picture for the people of America and what they believe to be a democracy, right? You know what I mean? Like I said, we've said this before.
They say it's a democracy, but, I know there's some Americans that watch, they'll probably say, hey, we're a constitutional republic, whatever that means.
What I mean is everyone's supposed to have a choice.
Exactly.
And there's some freedom involved here. But when your government can weaponize the judicial system against the leading opposing candidate at will without really anything substantial to back it up, that's a problem. That's a problem for democracy. That's a problem with the system. And I believe that they know that they're doing this. And if this gets televised, it's going to become very evident. So they don't want to put this on TV because it's going to make them look bad. That's number one. Number two, they did this to cut Trump's FaceTime out from when he was on the campaign trail. So if he's able to get in there and get his FaceTime, it sort of defeats the purpose of why they did this to begin with, because it just leaves him in the spotlight. And this might be one of those backfire moves, right? Where they do this expecting it to hurt him, but it just boosts his campaign again. And the third thing, kind of going back to Trump, I think they know he's going to be found innocent. And they also know that if he's found innocent on live TV, or public television rather, this is a huge turning point for them. They look really, really bad. This vilifies the Democratic Party. So I think they're going to do everything they can to fight it, but it's up to the judge, so I guess we'll see what happens.
I think we're going to see what happens, but at least we know for a fact one of them will be televised, and that's the Georgia one. And that one, obviously, we all know all these charges are bogus. So unless there's some serious corruption, then, I think he's going to walk away free from it as well, too. But I think one of the most advantageous things that's going to come out of this is Trump is going to get so much clout from this. He already has so much clout from, remember, the mugshot? That's on T-shirts. That's on, everything. That was I don't think people realize how big of a cultural
that was a huge backfire for the DNC.
Huge cultural
backfire.
Moment right there. And yes, it's a kind of a silly thing as to why that's why he's gaining support. But if we're just being real, that gives him a lot of support from plenty of people who just hated on him because they believe the CNN narrative. They believe the lies from the mainstream media, the NBCs, the MSNBCs, all that type of stuff. But I think especially with him not only getting that mugshot, then being put through all of that, and then being found not guilty.
Yeah.
Oh my God. When I say we're going to see memes for weeks, maybe not weeks, years because of that. So I think, like you said, it helps him in his campaign, especially the most, because his campaign team, those guys, they're fire. They're gonna make tons of cool clips out of this. There's gonna be tons of viral moments out of this, and it's gonna create support, especially with like young people, older crowd. Maybe aside from the people who have like terminal TDS, Trump derangement syndrome, like they're always gonna have TDS. You know what I mean? They're kind of a lost cause. And TDS doesn't Trump derangement syndrome, as I was mentioning. That's not necessarily a right or a left thing. Like it happens on both sides. There's people that hate him on both sides, regardless of the fact. But I think for the people in the middle, young people especially, and the people who kind of like doubted the whole fact that the system was rigged, and manipulated, this is gonna be a huge, like, shocking moment. I can't wait to see it live. I know for a fact I'm excited to see what comes out of it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the big thing here is that mugshot was when sort of a lot of the American people identified that they weaponized the DOJ against this guy. They've weaponized their political tools to try to shut this guy down. And they're like, enough. And it's funny, like you said, when he survives all this, I don't know, maybe you're too young, but 50 Cent got shot 9 times. That was his big story, right? That was his big story. This is the political equivalent, dude. I'm telling you. This guy to beat all these cases and have this mugshot and he basically won against the U.S. government and he's going to become the president again? Yeah, that's this guy. They're making this guy into a martyr and he loves it. This is such I cannot believe, while we're saying this out loud, how much they played into Trump's hands.
And this is his game. The thing about Trump, what a lot of people don't realize, the more you attack him, the stronger he gets.
Yeah,
like if I was a political opponent of Trump, I would just act like he doesn't exist, because just the more you feed into it, the stronger he gets, and like he can turn any situation into a positive for himself. And that goes to show you how much of like a marketer he is as a not only as a politician now, but as a businessman. Like, anything, he can flip anything into some publicity on his end.
I mean, that's what he's probably best at. But it's like I said, like the DNC and the Democrats are kind of like this vaccine, and he's this virus that just keeps mutating and getting stronger.
Yep.
And the more you stick him, the more this guy just keeps moving and mutating and just becomes this stronger thing. And he's taking over America. So I don't know.
Yeah, dude, it's gonna be an interesting time. I can't wait to see what comes out of it. I'm gonna be watching live.
I'm just glad I'm not American right now. I'm gonna be honest with you.
Pardon you,
I'm
what?
glad I'm not American right now.
Oh, yeah, it's going to be... But honestly, man, whatever happens there affects us a lot, too. Like,
it does,
we're America Junior at the end of the day.
We are, but I think that, like, their political divide is so strong that I think you're going to see...
they'll shoot each other.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I think you're going to see a lot of turbulence, violence, all those things when this election's over. I think that's what I think. I mean, I hope not, but that's what I think.
Yeah, I agree with that sentiment. But with that being said, let's move on to the next headline. So for headline number 6, we have the Supreme Court to hear a case on the Ontario election advertising rule. This is from sorry about that. This is based on a Canadian Press article, and the article it says that before 2021, third parties in Ontario were allowed to spend up to $600,000 on advertising in the 6 months before the provincial election call. But that year, the government stretched that restricted spending period to 1 year, while not increasing the amount. The progressive conservative government argued that the extended restriction was necessary to protect elections from outside influence, but critics said that it amounted to the government trying to silence criticism ahead of the 2022 provincial election. The law was found to be unconstitutional on free speech grounds, so the government reintroduced the provisions using notwithstanding clauses to guard against constitutional challenges. But several third-party groups successfully challenged the reintroduced provisions under a different section of the charter. The appeal court struck down that new law on the basis of violating a voter's right to meaningful participation in the electoral process, which isn't subject to the notwithstanding clause that was in the bill. And it gave the government 1 year to create a new charter-compliant legislation. But Ontario's Attorney General sought an appeal to the Supreme Court of Canada, and his office welcomed the Supreme Court's decision to hear the case. So, Jonathan, what do you think about this situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's 2 really important things to point out here. First of all, and it's a little more nuanced, is just talking about this particular issue. See, what Doug Ford did was he took a rule that was already in place. You can spend $600,000 on third-party advertising over 6 months. And what he did was he stretched that out to 12 months. So what he did effectively was put every other party at a disadvantage when it was time for election season. And that's not fair. Like, I understand why the Liberals and the Liberals and the NDP were pushing back. Like, this makes sense. You know, if this guy really wanted to do what was right, he should have put that rule into place the day he got into office, because that gives everyone a reasonable, call it a 4-year term, a reasonable amount of time to adjust. But he didn't. He did it so it was advantageous for him and put the other parties kind of at a, at a disadvantage. And honestly, that's the problem with politics. That's the problem with doing something like this. That being said, I don't disagree with the policy. I think anytime you support policy that gives you an unlimited cap on spending, what that basically says is your country is for sale. And all your political positions are for sale, and you're actually more likely to have foreign influence in your country. So at the end of the day, I mean, look what's happening in the United States. These super PACs are donating hundreds of millions of dollars, right? Like, I think this presidential campaign is going to cost probably between both parties like $25 to $30 billion will be spent on these campaigns.
For an election campaign?
Bro, for the presidential election, that's where it's probably going to land, between all the money spent between all the parties that are running. Yeah, that much money. This has become a pay-to-play program. That's what it is. And when you stop, look, the root of all political evil is in election financing. That's where it all exists. Because if you don't need the money to get there and you could win based on merit, then you can't be bought. But all these people are in this situation where everything's just bought and paid for. And like Adams, if you say the wrong thing, you're out. That's how this goes. And if the Supreme Court doesn't implement some sort of stopgap measure, rule, some sort of way to limit the funds going into these campaigns, we are going to be a mini America, right? Like, things never get better when you allow more and more money into campaigns. It really doesn't. And why do you need that much? We have all these social tools. They've got control of the mainstream media. They've got control of the newspapers, everything else that they need. If they have good ideas, they should spread. So putting a cap on this actually makes the most sense, and I'm very, very hopeful that Canada and the Supreme Court do apply some sort of rule here. And I'm hopeful that not only do they do it in Ontario, they blanket this rule across the entire country, because it's honestly what's best for the citizens.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with that at all. Like, I think I'm all in favor in minimizing political corruption, and we saw that allegedly happen in Ontario. No, it wasn't Ontario. It was during Justin's campaign, where I can't remember the MP's name. It was a Chinese MP, I believe, and I believe he had like a situation where he had like Chinese consulates and international students come vote for him, and he had like money donated from the CCP, allegedly from the CCP. I can't remember his name, but once I get his name, I'll put it up there for you guys and add a little bit more context. But besides the point there, it's showing that, like, you know, there's already like people at play that are already trying to influence North American politics on a grander scale. So if there's any way we can prevent that, in terms of like getting them less amount of money, then it's more about like getting your message across to the people and connecting with people that way, rather than the pay to play method. Yeah, I'm all for it at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. It's already polluted American politics. I don't think you can stop that. I think it's already way too late. And here, I mean, you've already got China influencing our elections that are, CSIS is basically going to the government saying, hey, China is interfering in these elections. And you have our prime minister being like, oh, I didn't hear what they said. I didn't see any of that stuff, because it benefits him. So it's already here. So if we don't put some measures in place immediately to stop these things, it is just going to spiral out of control. And like you said, then we become this mini America, and the country's for sale, and you never know what's going to happen next, man.
That's true. And just to come back to that point, I wanted to add a little bit more context for the people listening. The MP's name was Han Dong, and he was accused of receiving some support from Chinese support, and was manipulating several members of the Chinese diaspora to basically like automatically vote for him. Included like students who were here internationally, that if they could just have their address listed in that region, they could go and vote for him to, not in the main voting race, but like for him to become the MP of that race and everything like that. They could, influence it that way. And there's more information on it on the National Post. But I just want to add that quick context for anyone who is listening in on there.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, there's already enough wiggle room within our elections for corruption. It's obvious. It's evident. We know this. It's, you know, like I said, CSIS has already told the Canadian people that this is exactly what's happening. So by implementing some sort of measure to try to limit this from getting any further out of control is only what it's the best thing for Canadians. And I'm so hopeful that the Supreme Court does what's right here. But
that's what's up. Well, that's all we have for today, folks. So this has been a fun one. It definitely had a lot to talk about. But let us know what you think about this. Like, you know, what concerns you the most? You know, what do you want us to take a look into a little bit further for y'all and have that go on? But Jonathan, do you have anything else for today?
Not for today. Bye, everybody. Thanks.
See ya.